Thanks a lot, Graham. This time I'm joined by the best taco, and of course, Alpha Jackal himself, coach for Team Rival. First of all, how you guys doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for asking.
And I'm still doing great. Definitely really excited to get back into this match, even though that Adventures was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, Adventures look dope. New God looks dope. The caster. Again, congratulations to Gabriella the Tigress, Devia Allen. Kind of give the whole thing. Ron Jobber comes up just a little bit short. Very, very close in the voting for the caster. Really excited. Hopefully we get a chance to do something like this next year. I think we had a lot of fun and definitely identified a lot of cool people. But earlier in the day, we took a look at what Trifecta was able to do, or perhaps more accurately, what E-United was able to do. Alpha Jackal, you got a chance to watch that one. What were your feelings on that game?
I felt that E-United were able to identify the threats coming out from Trifecta and able to shut them down a lot quicker. We saw Hercules struggle a lot in the mid lane, especially during that unfortunate start to Game 2 where they had to remake due to some technical issues.
Right.
He was 0-3 in 7 minutes. And that's not a good look for a late game mage like Aphrodite. You want to keep safe in the early game, look to farm up till the mid game, and then utilize that Undying Love as often as possible onto a hyper carry.
Right. I mean, before we head into the match that we're about to take a look at, I want to ask you specifically a question about their draft, because Rival is a team that sort of embraces whatever you're good at, meta be damned, and there is something to say about following the meta, but there's also something to be said about doing what you're good at. And I've watched Trifecta play this. They're fine with the Guardian solo. They're fine with the Aphrodite. What do you think went wrong there? Do you think it was the draft?
I don't think it was the draft. I think it was just the fact that they allowed Benji to continue free farming on the Hercules in both games. And really what shut them down was the fact that they did the exact same draft going into Game 2. They should have drafted something slightly similar, but some different gods. Maybe swatch out the Ymir for a Cabrakan or something like that. Look to play a bit more aggressive and in their face.
Sure. Well, either way, E-United is a team that's qualified for Worlds. There is a second chance for Snoopy and the rest of Trifecta. They'll be knocked down, and we'll see them play in the Singleton games. We basically have a second chance bracket that will go on later on this weekend. But for right now, SpaceStation takes on the likes of JeffHindla and the rest of Luminosity Gaming, a team that has been on absolute fire. These guys have looked so damn good, and I think a lot of that has to do with Mask right there, but also recent acquisition Aquarius.
Season 4 has been a lot about the solo jungle synergy and being able to establish that kind of map control. And with Aquarius coming in so new to the mix for Luminosity, he's really been making waves. And on this chalk, I think most particularly, it's really been a staple pick for him on the team, but not because of the god itself, but mostly just because of the way that he's able to utilize the little bits of crowd control that he does have available to his favor.
Ton of pressure comes out from the Chalk, and you mentioned a little bit of crowd control right there. We see a 3-man knockup coming from that ultimate. Chalk is the butt of many jokes. However, he might be the butt here of the team saying, but wait, there's more. Talk to me about Chalk's implications to the game.
I think he offers a lot of control during the early game, and what allows Mask to do what he wants in the jungle, which is put pressure onto 2 lanes at once. If he doesn't have to babysit Aquarius throughout the early game, he can then put pressure onto the mid lane and let Baskin do what he does best, which is just mechanically outclass a lot of players in the mid lane.
I think that's the absolute key. I'm really excited that you mentioned the fact that he just lets Mask do what he wants, because Mask is a jungler that I think gets shrouded over. I think there's a lot of really strong junglers in this game, and Mask is a player that recently has been able to step up and shine because he's surrounded by these 2 laners. You've got Aquarius over there on the side lane, and then in the mid, you have Baskin, who just bringing the pain. I mean, this guy, we saw a slew of players transfer over to the mid lane early in the season or a little bit last season, and Baskin was the first one that I personally said, that's it, this guy's a mid laner.
If I was new to Smite entirely and had never seen an esports game before, and I came into Luminosity's mid laner being Baskin, I would have never expected that he played another role before that. You can just look at it and it seems natural. I think that's the main difference between Baskin and a lot of other players who have tried to make that transition, is it never really seemed to flow as naturally as it came to Baskin, and that's just, again, more props to his mechanical skill.
It's actually really scary. Baskin, I think, is one of the most mechanically gifted players in the entire world. However, the opposition for Luminosity Gaming also incredibly adept when it comes to pushing their buttons and paying attention to the mechanics. SpaceStation Gaming across the way in the black jerseys. These guys also very, very strong. When I look at this roster, Homiefe, Andy, Jigz, Zapman all strike me as some of the best mechanical players to ever touch the game. And Scary D, a little bit newer in the scene, but seeming to make an impact.
I think when you do have a look at this roster, you touch on it perfectly. It's all mechanically gifted players. And one of the issues that they have struggled with during the full split was meshing that individual talent together into a cohesive unit. And it started to work out a little bit better towards the end of the split, where they started to stringing some wins together and push on for that third position.
And that's kind of just something that you expect to happen whenever you take 5 players that are just so individually talented. They're usually the players, when they're coming from other teams, they're accustomed to having to be the hard carry factor. So they might tend to have a little bit more of those selfish habits where I've got to get all the farm here, I've got to make the plays here, I've got to come up big. And if there's anybody who likes to try and make that happen, I mean, you're looking at Steven Zaffis himself on Zapman.
Right. And I mean, he's the perhaps the most recent acquisition. We all knew he's joining the team. We saw what happened in the summertime. But he came in and actually plays for the squad in the fall and doesn't have that immediate impact that a lot of people, myself included, expected. I came in watching the SpaceStation Gaming team, and I said, look, Zapman's going to join the squad, and they're going to be #1, full stop, no doubt in my mind. Clearly that didn't happen. Jackal, what's your take? Why hasn't this team hit the ground running the way people expected?
When you have these big personalities going into it, there's always going to be this clash of heads. It's going to be, I'm the one who is the most important on the team. I'm the one that needs to carry.
Sure.
And Zapman came in and was going to be that person. And then all of a sudden it's just Andinster, they're going like, hang on, it's me. I'm the big person. Please give me Scylla, please.
You know, it's funny, Andy, knowing Andy, he's more on the quiet side. I feel like Andy just sort of reluctantly is like, you know what, if you guys aren't going to do it, fine, I'm going to do it. And he's been the guy that the team looks to time and time again to really find these victories. SpaceStation Gaming taking on LG. Let's go to game #1, picks and bans. Luminosity Gaming on the left-hand side, so they'll have the first pick and the first ban. SSG in the black and yellow will wait for #2, but the first ban is going to be Kukulkan, excuse me.
You're almost getting out that Kukulkan call just because of, the Kukulkan, and then you've got the Kukulkan. I understand entirely. I'm expecting maybe a Ratatoskr or Circuit bans as well, kind of similar to what we saw earlier today from that set with E United against Trifecta. I think that it was kind of important to know, and Hu-Yi being banned, that's also anticipated.
I was just about to bring that up. When you have Zapman and BaRRaCCuDDa in the game, Hu-Yi has to be a #1 priority, either pick or ban.
You know, it's interesting. I really like the way that the game has sort of matured here, because Hu-Yi is not necessarily always a top picker, top ban. He's a top picker, top ban when you're afraid of the hunter. You know, in that scenario, it's like, listen, I don't want these guys to have Hu-Yi. Whereas if the superstar is perhaps in a different position, you can allow the Hu-Yi to go and ban something else out. Raijin, early pressure in mid. Kukulkan, early pressure everywhere. Hu-Yi and Circuit going to be the bans. And one more time, the first pick, Ratatoskr for LG. And we're moving fast. SpaceStation, lock in a Muzen cop.
And they've had a lot of time to think about these drafts during that patch notes downtime, and especially after getting to evaluate that earlier set. Even though that's not going to be their opponents for the moment, they can kind of get an idea of maybe we want to try this one out. Morrigan loving this selection for Luminosity because of the fact that they already have that Ratatoskr. Hercules, an additional pickup as well, because that is already so much early game map control and pressure.
The Osiris also going to continue the trend of pressure. How do you like the first half of SpaceStation's draft, Alpha?
I think it's very CC lacking right now. Osiris has the biggest hard CC on that team comp so far with a stun, but it takes a long time to go off. There's a cripple and there's a slow. Let's have a look at LG. There's stuns on all 3 of them. There's a push. There's a pull from Hercules. I'm really scared right now for SpaceStation Gaming if LG round out their draft with some really potent frontliners.
Especially when you think about the play style of these two teams. Luminosity Gaming fight often and well. And this is a team fight draft so far. The Morrigan, a little bit of an assassin, but of course can do whatever the hell she wants.
I'd imagine SpaceStation, even though they don't have a whole lot of crowd control, they have a ton of damage, and it's really the burst potential that it seems like their draft is more leaning in that direction of, which is why I like the Najah ban from Luminosity. Eliminate at least one of the options that SpaceStation would have probably looked to have used in order to single focus out one member from LG.
Fafnir ban. I want to see a Fafnir ban here from LG.
Yeah. I think that's the most important thing. It's going to be the Raven instead. Fafnir, of course, is going to amplify the basic attack characters on the team, and so far there are 3 out of 3 basic attack characters on SpaceStation Gaming. Still no support, which is why Fafnir would be a good ban. SpaceStation thinking about it, and they're going to lock in the Fafnir.
It had to be an immediate selection because once you have a double hunter composition, to an extent, I mean, Sol, not your most typical hunter, but she can still have that impact, and especially when you throw a Fafnir into the mix, I mean, he brings exactly what we were both looking for. It's the crowd control and just the initial burst damage, and still single target focus.
That's very interesting. You and I both took note, talking to me about Bacchus and Hachiman.
Well, that's a very old school pick there from JeffHindla. Back in the day when he was considered sort of like a fringe pick on the meta, JeffHindla was the one person that was known for the Bacchus and one person that you had to ban it out against. So I'm really excited for this. Brings great control, very, very resilient as well. Has 14% damage mitigation in his passive built in. So when it gets to that late game against that Chug fully maxed out, he is very difficult, almost impossible to kill.
Susano going to be the last selection here for SpaceStation Gaming. All together, just looking at the drafts. Alpha, one word, who wins?
Luminosity.
Taco.
Luminosity.
Casters, ready, set, go.
Thank you, Tom. Over here I am. Hi-rez Finch. I do have Anatoly here with me. Welcome indeed. I'm happy to be here. And we got set 2 here for you. This is just the first day.
This is going to be so epic, honestly. Luminosity against SpaceStation Gaming, Zapman against BaRRaCCuDDa. What other matchup could you really want here to close the day for North America?
It feels like a tale as old as time here, Anatoly, between these 2 top-tier hunters, especially over here in North America. Can't think of hunters who've been around longer. Can't think of hunters who are more willing to fight with you than these 2. So hopefully we'll see lots of action. But let's talk a little bit here going into this game. I mean, we saw AMC and Ratatoskr highly prioritized. Those have got to come up big for them.
Absolutely. AMC provides so much good lane pressure and clear. And honestly, both of these teams just zoomed through the first picks and bans.
They did.
They've been waiting around for a while. So they honestly have been theory-crafting what they wanted to. They could just get inside each other's heads. And they kind of zoomed through that. And I'm expecting them to come out firing at the beginning of this game.
I agree with you 100% there, Toli. These teams they've known that this is what the matchup's going to be for a while, and not just that, but they got to see that first set. They got to see what it's like playing up there on the stage, and they're ready to get into it. So I expect them to come out firing. Luminosity versus SpaceStation Gaming. It's going to be a best of 5 that we're seeing here. And Toli, the winner, I mean, that's it. You're going to Worlds.
You're going to hi-rez Expo, and this is what it's all about here. And the loser will go drop 2 group plays where Trifecta is already waiting for them, losing 0-3 to E-United. But it's not going to be all doom and gloom for Trifecta because they can still battle their way through that.
And I'm glad you brought up Trifecta, because normally when you drop down into group stages from like this, from the quarters, you think, okay, well, maybe I can win down there. But it's teams like Trifecta and Noble and Energy. You don't want to play those dudes.
And honestly, all those matches are going to be best of 1. It's going to be so difficult to develop a strategy that you want to do and run it consistently. You're going to have to make a lot of adaptations throughout every different opponent. But in this best of 5 set, despite it being quick picks and bans for the first game, I'm expecting as this progresses, it's going to slow down a little bit as the meta kind of has its own internal shift.
And it looks like what we're seeing is BaRRaCCuDDa is starting in the mid lane here with Baskin, but it looks like it's going to be Jeff who's the one starting in the duo lane. So the early clear here likely going to be able to go to Luminosity because they brought their AD carry here to the mid.
That's true. Morrigan's not going to be able to really contest too much in the mid lane, but in the solo lane, Aquarius and Mask taking a lot of damage for their trouble. And during picks and bans, I was curious where this Osiris was going to go, whether it was for Scary D or onto Homie. And I'm really glad that SpaceStation elected to keep the Assassin traditional to Homiefe because that's where he has the most success. And with this 2-on-2 combination, SpaceStation has the edge on the right side getting these elementals.
And they are going to go ahead and take those elementals. And you talked about having the true assassin for Homiefe. Well, someone that's pretty close to matching the mobility of Ratatoskr is Susano. He can get around the map quick, totally. So this Susano is going to be very important. How well Homiefe can match mass rotations.
It's just all about making sure that he doesn't have to necessarily engage. He could just continue farming, wait for those Ratatoskr to engage, and then more importantly, we've seen time in and time out in Smite's esports history where sometimes the counter engage is more impactful. So I wouldn't be surprised if Homiefe just allows Mask to try to strike for first blood and then come in for the cleanup.
And then even though Luminosity got that pressure in mid, and so often we see when you take that pressure in mid, you exert it over there on the right-hand side of the map where there's that neutral farm. Now we see that it's actually these oracles that are going over here, and they got the elementals. It's really SpaceStation who've gotten the control of those neutral camps.
It's very important to establish early neutral control, and thus far, SpaceStation has been able to do so, getting themselves about a 300 gold lead. Not going to do anything too much with it quite yet as Jeff jumps on Zap.
Good knockup and the stun coming out. Actually using the sprint in response to the rotation from Homiefe. Lots of damage on the Jeff very quickly. Wow. And continuing to go in. Here's Homiefe getting first blood on the JeffHindla.
Very important first blood and not done yet. BaRRaCCuDDa even forced to use the beads just to negate the slow out of Zapman. Luminosity not known to play this aggressive this early on before establishing an advantage. And because that belly flop from Jeff was down, it was very easy for the cleanup from Homie. And we were talking about that counter engage, how impactful it could be.
And you were talking about them coming out of the gate firing totally. That's what we've seen here so far to start this game off. A nice rotation from Homiefe. And lately we've been seeing almost sort of like a ceasefire in the duo lane, right? Just let him farm over there. Not from Homiefe, though.
No, not at all. Especially when it's Zapman dangling himself like a juicy piece of meat, playing this Muzen cob, and around the corner was that heavily mobile Susano around the corner with the speed buff. Great first blood opportunity for SpaceStation to get some momentum now under their belt, because they already got some gold under their belt just from controlling those neutral camps. With that first gold bounty, the ball is in their court.
The ball is going to be in their court moving forward. Homiefe on that Susano, the one with that first blood helping him out. So he'll be just that much further ahead of Mask. But because Mask can buy that acorn, can he mitigate some of that early lead a little bit?
That's very true. Ratatoskr doesn't have to go back to the base to purchase that starter item. He's just going to continuously upgrade it throughout the early course of the game, and he should still be on track in terms of maybe defending his own speed buff or maybe looking for a speed buff invade on his own if SpaceStation all back on an awkward timing. And despite finding that first blood for SpaceStation, BaRRaCCuDDa with a 1-level lead over Zap, still doing a good job farming considering that he was able to soak in his own red and purple buff experience.
And that's impressive too, because it was BaRRaCCuDDa who started in the mid lane, so to still be out in front of Zapman is looking good. But 3-man rotation, Lord of the Afterlife already coming down on Aquarius to reduce healing. Gets pulled back in by Homiefe using that Susano control very well, but tanky Hercules is going to be all right.
It was a very similar story to the left side of the map where Jeff uses his belly flop, Aquarius uses his driving strike, and SpaceStation trying to take advantage. But luckily for Aquarius, the sprint was still available. He was able to escape, negate the slows from Scary D, not able to get hit by Lord of the Afterlife, and he's just going to walk away cleanly.
Now, I want to ask you here, Totally, what is it about this Hachiman pick that's appealing here to BaRRaCCuDDa where he's able to pick it? Because there wasn't too much focus put like on banning hunters or anything like that. I mean, there was still even like Jingwei available. And
the thing about Hachiman is just the get out of jail free card. Yeah. The amount of distance that he can cover with that horse that he can use defensively and honestly also offensively to chase people down, getting a little bit of slows as well. And then obviously if you are good mechanically, hitting that dash to apply the stun is so good for boxing. And there's not too many gods that can really contest against an Muzen cob in the 1v1 boxing category, and with a Hachiman with a 1-level lead, especially if he consistently gets the red buff, that could be one topic of discussion. Looking at the dueling, looking at this matchup between BaRRa and Zap.
And a Muzen cob was first picked here, so it's very likely, you know, BaRRaCCuDDa was putting some thought towards his matchup against the B, being able to shut it down, because earlier in the day, Toli, we saw a Muzen cob do very well.
That's very true. I think that the game plan for SpaceStation was to try to maybe focus out BaRRaCCuDDa. They banned away the Hou-Yi, respecting the fact that Luminosity could have first picked it, going for the Ratatoskr instead, as well as taking AMC and Soul very early. Sometimes BaRRa has been known to play that magical ADC, but in the Soul lane, a lot of action.
Yeah, good job pulling Scary D back in, but that tether's enough to deter the aggression from Mask and Aquarius, giving them, you know, just a little bit of extra beefiness there so they couldn't go in on.
And not only that,
there is more engagement in the mid-half.
That's true. There's a little bit of action there, getting a little bit of damage onto him as Baskin, half health, using that health potion. Luckily for ScaryD, though, earlier on, he was at 7 stacks out of 8 on that passive. He was able to mitigate a lot of that damage, and then as soon as he used another ability, he went into that ethereal form, giving him that Fatalis effect for the next couple of in-hands.
And that's why we see Jigz rotating over, just to help alleviate a little bit of that pressure for him that's being established by Mask and Aquarius over there in that dual lane. But we did see Andinster commit the Supernova in mid, so that's one ultimate that is down for a moment. Not too much that's up on the map right now, though, so that might be why he was a little more free, feeling, you know, I can commit that cooldown. About
a 90-second cooldown. You're not too worried if you're Andinster. There's not going to be an early 6.5-minute Gold Fury from the side of Luminosity. If any team's going to do it, it's going to be SpaceStation, simply because Jigz, playing this Fafnir, has that AoE coerce once he goes into that Draconic form.
Mask going in on Homiefe, gets the stun, and actually the elemental spawn right at that exact moment. JeffHindla doesn't quite hit the belly flop, but either way, Luminosity have pushed SpaceStation out, and now they're the ones pulling in those fire elementals.
Their first neutral cramp rewarded. Baskin in very aggressive position, getting the poke off from Jigz, because in the sky, Mask not able to connect. Great underhand tactics from Jigz.
Yeah, Jigz recognizing that was coming, so he's able to jump right on out of there. Again, Aquarius unafraid to go in, actually drops down the activate on top of him. ScaryD so low, but that stun enough to get him out of there.
I thought that driving strike was about to come up any second. I think that he tried to time out that boulder to immune the stun effect from the tether, but that tether actually reduces your damage. So if he waited a little bit longer, but in the sky is going to be Baskin himself changing into that Ratatoskr, not able to pick off Homie.
But Homiefe preemptively beads there, so he didn't get knocked up. Now, the Supernova back up right when Andinster needed it. That's enough to push him off the speed for now, but it looks like actually the call's just to give it up. So a successful invade for Luminosity, as now this jungle side of the right-hand side is actually going in their favor.
These teams are very even, honestly. Looking back at the regular online portion of it, they actually split 1-1. Now, SpaceStation should have won game 1 if you look back at the tapes. They took too much damage on their Titan, but historically, these two teams have been just very even throughout, and despite SpaceStation getting that early game lead, Luminosity is a veteran team that knows where the holes are that they can poke into, and so far, they've been doing a good job of kind of abusing Homiefe in this later portion.
You're right. They're not just connected by those past matches. They even got some similar teammates on here, too. So you're right. These are teams that are even, that know each other here totally. So I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see them stay this even. Only about 400 or so gold, or 500 separating these two teams right now. That's how close they are, and that's basically just the first blood bounty in favor of SpaceStation.
It's just going to come down to whenever some of these hunters get those later levels, once the Executioner is finished, once the Devourer's Gauntlets gets online with fully stacks lifesteal, we're going to see some of these Gold Fury attempts, but thus far, teams are just kind of feeling each other out. You don't want to reveal a little bit too much here in the first game, because it's going to be a long set.
And it looks like, you know, speaking of those builds too, in our mid lanes, we're moving a little bit away. A lot of the times we see that Book of Thoth rush for our mages in that mid lane, but it looks like we're moving away from it in favor of maybe a little bit more survivability.
It seems that way, at least. Andinster going for Shoes of Magi, whereas Baskin going for these Traveler Shoes. He really wants to try to get some of his increased net worth there, getting 30 gold every 90 seconds per God hit there. And we've seen that actually earlier on last set, where I think it was Panicat that went for those Talaria boots there. And this could be a strategy that some of these players imply here inside this land.
We do see a little bit of a grouping happening by these mid-harpies, as the mid-harpies on the duo side are about to spawn. SpaceStation, the ones who are in the stronger position to get it started, but the belly flop comes out, hits anyone. Actually, Intoxicate's dropped on top of Homiefe. He's very low. Mask up in the air. He comes in too. Supernova creates a little bit of space for him, but not enough. Mask gets the first kill for Luminosity, but immediately it's returned to Jigz, and Andinster comes in too. 2 quick kills for SpaceStation Gaming as they come out 2-1.
A 2-for-1 at the end of the day, but what is SpaceStation going to get off of this right now? Gold Fury could be looked at potentially with Jigz being in that draconic form, but I think they're more content about still playing slow and steady. Their respawn timers are still a little bit too low here to try to abuse that fact, and without these soul laners making these rotations quite yet, better safe than sorry. I'm thinking Aquarius has solo kill potential here, but no ulti available.
Yeah, he's putting a lot of pressure on ScaryD. Look at that tower already very low. Actually goes and pulling up into the driving strike enhance. Baskin is here as well. They clean it up on ScaryD.
That's a solo kill. I don't care if Baskin was distance there. He didn't hit. He didn't hit it, so it didn't matter. There was no pressure there at all. That was an official solo kill, and something that I was thinking about to myself going into this set was the two wildcard factors between Aquarius and Scary D. Scary D has been known to perform at LAN during the Worlds with Luminosity Gaming. He was actually the reason that LG was able to go the distance against Energy, but then in the earlier LAN performance during group play, he was kind of a little nervous there, getting soloed by Walrus, and this time around, I think he needs to kind of shake off a little bit of these nerves and just play his game.
And this change up in the roster for Luminosity too, where now they've got Aquarius over there in the solo lane. It only recently happened. Belly Flop actually goes in onto Andinster, doesn't get the knockup, but it's good damage. And gonna have to back up after that. So good engagement from Luminosity. But as I was saying before, this change up in the roster, they haven't done a big LAN like this with Aquarius. This is their first time with this 5-man unit.
That's true, but Aquarius has been forming really well online here, feeling very confident. Luminosity going into the sky, trying to go on Zap.
And that is going to be the call. Going deep into the backline is Mass, but recognizing it might not be for him, Activate comes out, and that gets 2 quick kills. BaRRaCCuDDa able to knock it up. In fact, let's go ahead and get a listen in. Steel Series, thanks for providing it.
Let's go!
Good plays, boys. Good plays.
Nice combo
I'll
there.
defend it.
I'll defend it.
Really good combo.
Yeah, good setup. Shit, boys.
Beautiful plays.
Let me tank.
Let me
tank.
Let me tank. Yeah.
Yeah, can we double or just gold?
No, push left, push left, push left.
Alright. I want to check purple. Purple's up.
Yo, BaRRa, push left and back. BaRRa, push left and back.
Okay.
I'm gonna do
You
this
see
in
Faf
back.
coming to you, BaRRa?
And once again, thank you, Senhaj, there for that listening in. Glad we got to hear Luminosity in that fight and listening to some of those comms. Totally, that's the kind of communication we know we can expect from LG and this team that's been around as long as they have.
Cool, calm, and collected.
Oh, yeah.
Just like a couple of cucumbers there. Luminosity not worried about anything despite giving up first blood earlier on. They knew how to take advantage of SpaceStation's misposition here, even applying a lot of this global pressure between Mask and on the Ratatoskr, and then Baskin that can switch into Mask anyway, making some of these rotations in the solo lane, on the left side as well. These side lanes are just not safe from the double global pressure, and Luminosity rewarded with a relatively early gold Fury. Not the biggest lead in the world here, but it's something to build a foundation off of.
And it's something that they needed to. Baskin's been doing a really good job with the Morrigan, using that changeling and having impact across the map, whether using the Ratatoskr form or we've seen him use some other ones as well. That pressure coming out from Ratatoskr, the global pressure as well as Baskin, has been a little bit too much for SpaceStation just so far, but as you said, it's certainly not out of control. Only 2,000. These are the beginnings of a lead here for Luminosity.
And with this Gold Fury still down for a little bit longer, the attention is going to be shifted towards this solo side where Portal Demon is looking mighty juicy here. Jeff positioning himself aggressively alongside Baskin and Mask, knowing that the speed buff is about to spawn for SpaceStation, still trying to make something happen onto Scary D, but he has that ethereal form to mitigate a little bit of damage.
And it looks like that's going to be fine for him. Scary D knows he can back up, but that's been another big part of this as the belly flop lands on Andinster, not quite into separate, so he did get knocked up, drops Supernova himself, but no damage comes from it. Through the Cosmos, lets JeffHindla clean that one up. See you later, Andinster.
Dropping the mic, dropping the wine jug there, just laying down the damage on his former teammate there. Must have felt a little bit good there for Jeff, but Andinster having to use his ultimate defensively, knowing he was in a lot of trouble. Scary D's in a lot of trouble as well.
That was a good pull from Aquarius that set him up back into everybody. He's gone. Baskin now going up into the air to try and deter Jigz from coming in and have anything to say about this Portal Demon, which is going down in favor of Luminosity. But over on the left-hand side, just trying to get what they can back for SpaceStation.
Not able to really make these rotations despite playing a Muzen cop, getting more movement speed inside the hives, even having Wing Blade in his kit there, in his build rather, Zapman really wanting this movement speed and negating some of the slows potentially out of Luminosity. Didn't make the rotation, really prioritizing this farm there, and the net worth, you could tell Zapman the highest in his team, but he's been getting a lot of solo farm. I think it's time now to see him in some of these team fights on the right side of the map. A level 15 of Muzen Cop can make the difference.
And now this gold lead climbing up more to about 4,000 in favor of Luminosity, or maybe like 3,000 or so. But over there on that left-hand side, SpaceStation were kind of in control, and we see Mask and Aquarius go really aggressive in on that left-hand side. And that's when they finally started pulling things back in their control. They haven't given it up since.
In the mid lane, though, doing a lot of damage on Baskin, recognizing his ultimate is down, and it's just not enough damage. Finding potentially return kill Homiefe in a lot of trouble, trying to dance around Jigz, but it's just not enough.
JeffHindla drops in Toxic to clean it up as Andinster also takes down Mask. So far, this one's actually been 2 for 1 in favor of SpaceStation as they look for a little bit of a return. Aquarius undeterred here by Scary D. He's happy to stick around.
Well timed to separate from Andinster, avoiding all the damage from that boulder out of Aquarius. BaRRaCCuDDa was trying to zone away SpaceStation on the top side, and he's done so successfully. It was a 2-for-1, though, at the end of the day. Not able to really get the answer that LG really wanted to because Baskin, his ultimate, was not available.
And once again, we saw there the impact Aquarius can have. I know that teamfight did go more in favor of SpaceStation Gaming, but look at him. He's how far ahead he is. Scary D already has that Breastplate of Valor finished off, already starting to work on what could be, you know, like a Bulwark and that magic defense tree that he's working on as well. Even maybe a Pestilence if he wants to shut down any healing. Not a whole lot, but he's got some options here, and he's just ahead.
And it's going for a different style as well, simply because Height of Nemean Line has been picked up for Scary D. He wants to just stick on BaRRaCCuDDa, get him out of these team fights, make sure that the return damage is going to be at full force, especially with that Thorns. And I think Aquarius just wants to try to spam his pull pushes, displace as many people as possible, because we saw what Benji was able to do when he played Hercules, playing it in both the first 2 games, forcing Trifecta to ban it in game number 3. And this could be the difference in terms of the land meta, or at least for North America from what I've seen, is how Hercules has changed the dynamic flow.
Looking to force out Scary D so they can go for the speed buff invade one more time is Luminosity, and they do successfully strip that away. I don't know when the last time Homiefe was able to secure his speed buff was, but it's been a while as Luminosity put some focus on this solo lane side of the map.
And with Scary D having all this physical defense, no magical defense against the damage from Baskin there. He was able to poke him out quite heavily. Aquarius left alone in a really weird situation. He's forced to sprint away. Lord of the Afterlife not allowing any healing.
But it's Scary D who takes away too much damage. He's the one that gets blown up. Good bait from Aquarius, if you want to call it that. Dropping down to onto Andinster, but that Disappary was enough to keep him alive. Big damage coming on to 4 members. Supernova does let Andinster get the return in the basket, but BaRRaCCuDDa gets his own kill.
SpaceStation on full retreat, except for Homiefe trying to find the return kill, and he will on mask. Great pull from Aquarius. He's able to answer in kind, and a triple kill coming out of BaRRaCCuDDa as he takes out Zapman.
Yeah, BaRRaCCuDDa just looking too big in this engagement. That's a 4-for-2 in favor of Luminosity, and they still have some of their most important members up, in particular BaRRaCCuDDa. That's why we see them making a beeline over here for the Gold Fury. They're going to look to extend that gold lead out a little bit further, but totally, why'd they win that fight so handily?
It was just a nice bait because it was all attention onto Aquarius.
Yeah.
Now, even if Lord of the Afterlife already was used, the heal was already applied from Aquarius. He sprinted to get away from that Draconic form. There was too many cooldowns used onto such a tanky Hercules that's sitting at level 17. Now, despite not having much magical defense, it's only a level 14 Soul who doesn't have that much penetration online, doesn't have Obsidian Shard finished, nothing of that nature, so he's just sitting pretty, absorbing all these cooldowns.
And that's what Aquarius has done so well. We've seen him not just displace, but be the one that's soaking up all the damage. I mean, in that fight, nearly 5 members collapsed on him over there on that in between the jungle pass, and he was still able to not just make it out, but turn that team fight into his team's favor.
And what was also more impressive was how long Andinster survived. He used the Aegis to negate Jeff's Intoxicate, even disapparating from more damage, but SpaceStation was also clumped together a little bit too much around their own speed buff. A lot of AoE damage from LG, really sacrificing SpaceStation's lives.
In particular, BaRRaCCuDDa was able to come up big for him. He's the one that got that triple kill. Now we're seeing them up a little bit more like 5,000 gold in favor of Luminosity. 12-7 here are the kills, and we're 20 minutes in. It does not feel like 20 minutes totally,
not at all,
because they have been battling.
It's a slow and steady climb for LG. I don't think SpaceStation is necessarily out of it, but they can't let this game get completely out of control. The level lead here from Zap between BaRRa is the biggest telltale sign of how this game's kind of panned out in LG's favor. And I think this is the time that LG just want to stick together from here on out and really try to get some 5-on-5s under their belts.
But they are at the point now, totally, where they probably don't want to let another big engagement go. It'd be hard for them to recover at that point. Baskin is the call in mid. He's able to stay alive just for a moment there with Aegis, but not long enough. Zapman gets kill credit for that one. Probably couldn't go onto a better target as dropping down his mask.
And a great opportunity for SpaceStation to take advantage of Baskin. He wasn't even able to get his ultimate off. He had to use both his relics, but didn't have time to really switch into anybody else and get out of dodge there. He could have probably transformed into mask if he had the timing and dash away, but while you're in the Aegis form, you can't use abilities. Hercules.
They are able to secure the Portal Demon. Now they're going to go and look for a little bit more. Jigz transforms with that Dragonic Corruption, but backs on out. Actually, they just take the Portal Demon, and they're happy with their small win because they are cutting into that lead.
It's very true. A 5-on-4 advantage for SpaceStation gets answered with a Portal Demon. Didn't want to risk going for Fire Giant considering Baskin was going to respawn momentarily, and there was 4 healthy members from LG that could easily hinder the progress of that late game objective. And look at the score. It's only 12-8 in the kill column, but with LG having this 4,000 goal lead, more importantly the experience lead, they've still been doing a good job of dictating the way they want to control this game.
And I think a big part of it there was Aquarius. Yes, they took down Baskin, but the real thorn in their side all game long has been this Hercules that Aquarius is piloting. So if he's there standing in the face, you don't want to go for any big-time late game objective. So instead, they back up and they wait.
If anything, Baskin needs to be looking at that last death as, okay, like if I'm left alone, I'm easily going to get targeted. Right. The blink from Homiefe just right around the corner was too difficult to really respond to. Once you get pulled in here from Susano, you're pretty much mincemeat, and that's exactly what happened. SpaceStation probably going to be looking at Baskin with red eyes.
And so far, it's felt like if they have the big grouped up team fights, it goes in favor of Luminosity as they force down that tier 1 tower in mid. Just a little bit extra global gold going into everyone's pockets. But it felt like when they have those big grouped up team fights, it goes in favor of Luminosity.
So far, so good. Yeah, because Aquarius, right, just rolling down the boulder every which way. And I honestly think as the game progresses, I wouldn't be surprised also if the AoE damage increases by Baskin going into Hercules as well. Yeah. The same way Veneno did for E United, copying Benji's, so that could be a strategy that LG employs later down the road.
And we've seen this, we saw this earlier when we saw Morrigan picked. Who you choose to transform into really is a huge deal. Do you want to go into a mask and get another initiator? Do you want to go into, like you said, Aquarius and get another tanky frontliner, or Andinster and borrow some of that big AoE damage with the Supernova?
And I'm seeing so far a little bit of a grouping by SpaceStation in that mid lane. I think they really want to focus out Baskin there in the mid lane. But his relics are just now coming off cooldown. He will be safe. As Zapman goes back to the left lane, he could get caught off by BaRRaCCuDDa, but instead just dropping the ward very safely at the top side, knowing that Gold Fury will respawn here soon.
But to be honest, it hasn't felt like Baskin rather has been the real big problem. I mean, I think that yes, he's having an impact, but not nearly as much as maybe Aquarius, Mask, and BaRRaCCuDDa are right now. And then JeffHindla with his initiation. So yeah, try and limit what Baskin can do, but I don't know if that would solve all their problems.
Probably not here, but still waiting patiently around this goal here. Jeff is just going to spot it out because Oracle Vision has been for SpaceStation thus far. Everybody's backing on the right-hand side of the map, but it's going to be over their own wards. That's a telltale sign. Whenever you back, the safest place to back is over your own sentry ward, obviously. They're not going to be much vision on that side from the opposing team, and you can get off a safe back. No adaptations from LG quite yet.
And we're riding along with BaRRaCCuDDa right now, who's not too far, actually, from full build. That's not too surprising. He's been level 20 for a while now. We were talking about this a little bit before, but one of the best farmers in the world right here is BaRRaCCuDDa. Definitely best in North America, at least with gold per minute. Is now the Gold Fury is going to be the call. JeffHindla looking to try and deter them away a little bit. Does get the stun off on the Scary D, and Luminosity cleanly secure the Gold Fury.
And no possible contention from SpaceStation. I think they heard Baskin go stealth, was very afraid of that stun. Even seeing JeffHindla just waddle his way through, just expecting a belly flop momentarily here, and that's just going to force SpaceStation out. They're not worried necessarily about the Gold Fury. They're more worried about the Fire Giant. They're successfully willing to give up that objective, knowing that it's not going to change the outcourse, at least in terms of sieging these towers, but the Fire Giant buff will. So if LG force that objective, that's when we'll see SpaceStation sort of contest.
Now, do you think they had a chance to contest it there, or was the zoning just too good on that Gold Fury? You think it was a conscious call not to do it, or were they just zoned out very well?
They were zoned out very well, and honestly, if they did get engaged on by JeffHindla, Baskin's damage would have just toppled in their favor. I think SpaceStation knew that LG weren't going to hard commit to this Gold Fury if somebody was in position to get engaged on. Zapman peeled off very safely there, and with good reasoning there, because LG is not going to be able to just run wild on these towers off of that second Gold Fury of the game.
And you were talking a little bit about that Sentry Vision over here. It was all in favor of SpaceStation until just a moment ago. JeffHindla recognized it as well. He came over and did a little bit of counter warding, so now it's a little bit more even over here by that Fire Giant pit. But when we're sitting at 25 minutes into the game, this is where the action is going to start happening for Anatoly. Yes, Luminosity's only about 5,000 or 6,000 gold ahead right now, but they get Fire Giant, they start taking tier 2 towers, they start getting all that global gold. That's when it spirals out of control.
This next Fire Giant dance is going to be so important here. And BaRRaCCuDDa left alone to Portal Demon. He's going to be able to get it down to less than half health. Nobody from SpaceStation even going to be possibly able to steal that one away. Nice pull push onto Jigz, getting off a decent amount of damage as Mask is in the sky looking for his next victim.
He is looking to come crashing down. Actually gets 2-man knock-up on Andinster and Zapman. No immediate follow-up, though, so LG will just back up and take that Portal Demon as a win for themselves in that fight. And that's because they can't come in and try and contest.
BaRRaCCuDDa yet again just keeping his gun on the objective. He's going to dash away because it's now LG that wants to fight.
It's Jigz that they've gotten control, but it kind of pushed him a little bit away from the damage, so now he's okay.
Baskin.
But it's Andinster, the one that's in a lot of trouble, forced to back off right away. But up into the air one more time, though, is the Rat looking to come crashing down. Aquarius gets Andinster, and over here we see Scary D trying to go up against BaRRaCCuDDa.
Zapman trying to run away on the north-hand side. Baskin's going to chase him down. The stun is good as Homie takes out BaRRaCCuDDa. Zapman trying to box out Baskin, trying to lifesteal as much as he can. Baskin now in a 1v2, finds one, doesn't find Homie, though. It's a 2-for-2 at the end of the day.
He lived long enough, though, to let Homiefe get over there and at least turn that into a trade. Now looking to just see if they can get the speed buff here. RLG knocking up Scary D. He's taking a lot of damage, but still a tanky Osiris at this point. Now he's looking to actually turn it in on the Mask, and let's go ahead and get on out of there as Aquarius is just a little off the mark with the pull.
With the ethereal form, with the tether, it's so easy to absorb all that damage. Scary D was not worried whatsoever.
Right.
Even sustaining with that Gladiator shield even further. It's just so tanky, so resilient, very difficult to lock down. And that 2-for-2 was mid and Hunter for mid and Hunter, and it was very difficult for either side to get Fire Giant because sometimes a 2-for-2 can still result in an objective depending who dies.
And I gotta think that's still a fight that's in favor of SpaceStation Gaming because Luminosity don't get the Fire Giant. That started off with BaRRaCCuDDa pulling it. And not just starting it, but it was like to half health. If there had been no fight there, he would have happily taken it. So yes, SpaceStation trade evenly, but because they slow the game down, I gotta think it's in their favor.
And unfortunately for SpaceStation, Andinster was that focal point, the first blood of that team fight, and he didn't even get off his ultimate. He was just on the full retreat. Baskin realized just how much damage he did once he stealthed on the backhand side. He went instantly to the Ratatoskr, trying to dive the backline, but he tunnel visioned a little bit there, trying to chase down Zapman. He was good to just retreat after that. Now, he traded himself 1-for-1. If he backs on off there, maybe LG just straight up get the Fire Giant, considering that Zapman has to back with such a low health pool.
But they're right back to the Fire Giant again. Our BaRRaCCuDDa, they're looking ready to try and get this Fire Giant started up. So let's go ahead to SmiteVOD listen in here for SpaceStation this time.
I got poked.
Okay, they reset it.
Hachiman's
really low.
Careful. Can we reset? I got poked.
Scary. That'll be fun.
Hachiman's kind of poked.
I need
help.
I have a stun here.
This is not good for me. Yeah, I'm dead.
Nice. I'm gonna die. Good trade.
It's they're chasing Andy, guys.
That was a good listening that we're able to get there. But what I noticed was the calls were really clear as Aquarius still under trouble from Scary D. Good knockup from JeffHindla to force him back. But the calls were really crisp from SpaceStation at the beginning, but once they start getting hard engaged on, they kind of collapsed. The comms did, I mean.
The damage from Aquarius, which is too strong. That boulder connecting between that blue buff and the tier 2 tower wall intersection, just decimating the health pools out of SpaceStation. And you heard Zapman, I need help in the backline. That was because he was getting dove by Mask. Mask sacrificed himself for the greater good, making sure that there was no late game Muzen Cobb doing the damage that he needed to do. And with that clean 3-for-1 engage after the fact that Aquarius dove Andinster, Fire Giant rewarded for Luminosity.
And now Luminosity are in the position we were just talking about, Toli, where yes, they're up that 6,000 or so gold, but now the map's open to them too, and they can start farming from like what I like to call them, those banks, those tier 2 towers where you got 1,500 gold waiting for your team. They even go take the Gold Fury. Now SpaceStation are on damage control mode. They got to make sure they don't lose too much here.
LG is such a meticulous team about getting every little thing and then slowly building off of it.
Yeah.
The way they've been playing this whole game entirely, if we even saw the graphs, it would just be a slow and steady hill climb for them on both the gold and experience, and nothing has really changed here. They're just slowly drawing SpaceStation in like a moth to the flame almost, and SpaceStation have been biting every single time. No one from Luminosity is even overexposed any longer here. Baskin with the highest death in his team. He was getting picked off a little bit every time his ultimates were down, but now this is the late game where he can easily stealth in, get the damage off that he needs to, and then find the hard reset by switching into Aquarius or Mask to continue the engage.
And that's what it felt like from Luminosity. It felt like they kind of were like, okay, if Baskin's going to be all focus, Baskin can be the focus. Sorry, but Aquarius and BaRRaCCuDDa are going to free farm and free cast if that's how you want it to be. And that's what Luminosity did. They continued to push the issue on objectives. Like you said, that slow burn. They forced SpaceStation into bad engagements. Now the Tier 2 tower in left has fallen. Tier 2 in mid and right are exposed. And Luminosity are looking to push that lead to a point where SpaceStation can't fight back.
And before even continuing to this left side, Phoenix stripping the red buff away from SpaceStation, giving it to Baskin, really respecting the late game magical damage out of this one here. ScariD is going to have a hard time surviving if he's overexposed in that front line. Going to get the second Tier 2 tower after that dual lane, switching their attention to the mid lane. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't continue here, wanting to strip away that last remaining tower, just keeping the Titan more and more vulnerable.
And take a look, all the towers are still available for Luminosity. I point that out for a couple of reasons. One, it shows that SpaceStation have really not had pressure all game. But two, it means that if they do win a couple fights, they're going to have a lot to push through before they can find a way to win the game totally.
It's very important to know when that next team fight, or where rather that next team fight is going to happen, because when I refer to that earlier game between LG and SpaceStation, where the first game SpaceStation could have won, they won that team fight at the end of the game, but they left their own base trying to get the middle Phoenix. With the left side Phoenix and the right side Phoenix exposed, their Titan just got absolutely melted here, and the travel time is going to be very important for SpaceStation to get to the Titan of LG if they manage to get back into this game.
Right, that's some security that you're right, that LG have that SpaceStation didn't back then. LG can play a little looser here because they know that even if they give up a big fight, SpaceStation can't take too much off of just that one fight. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Luminosity go in here to try and make sure they get this Phoenix. Mid-Phoenix appears to be the cause. They've got 4 members here, and then they have Mask pushing over and right to try and double up the pressure.
And LG have a really good sieging team here with Aquarius playing this Hercules. A lot of respect to the amount of control that Aquarius has. Even going into the backline could be Baskin with that stealth form.
It's ScariD who gets pulled in, and it's Mask who's up in the air looking to crash down. Actually already has crashed down. The boulder comes in big, and ScariD has to leave early. Now getting pulled in, though, is Jigz. He's already very low, has the leap available. Supernova splits the team fight, gets nothing. JeffHindla, though, gets Jigz. We'll see you later, Fafnir, as Baskin comes in, and BaRRaCCuDDa cleans that one up.
And it's the first victim here. Mid-Phoenix falling shortly after. Now it's a 5-on-3. SpaceStation having to defend these Phoenixes as long as they possibly can. And the damage here from LG, it's too strong here. The late game form has shown. It's clearly evident. Aquarius trying to find Zapman in the backside while the rest of his team gets this left side Phoenix. There's no stopping LG with this Fire Giant buff now expiring. They got what they came for, which was 2 Phoenixes.
Left side Phoenix did also fall, and totally. There's only 3 enemy Titans between you and Worlds. If you're here in these quarterfinals right now, that's all that's in between you. And already Luminosity are in position to try and take that very first one. 2 Phoenixes down, only 1 remaining. They're going to go back. They're going to farm up, and they're coming back to look to push. What does SpaceStation have to do to defend?
SpaceStation are going to try to delay some of the backs potentially from LG. Aquarius is going to be that buffer to make sure that his hyper carries will be allowed to back rather, as this Fire Giant's about to respawn in 10 seconds. Everyone from SpaceStation has respawned after that last death encounter, but leaving their base exposed, I think they have some nightmares and flashbacks after what happened in that first game of the online portion, so I don't expect them necessarily to leave their base exposed this time around again.
They're going to make sure they don't have minions pouring in on their Titan this time, but SpaceStation actually making a call here totally to try and hurry up and take the Fire Giant before Luminosity have a chance to get into position. Do they give it up? That is the call to give it up, but can they get away for free? Aquarius pulls ScaryD back in, and now that looks to be the call, but they back up. Good discipline. Just go for the objective.
The desperation from SpaceStation. They thought that maybe they could sneak it in here because LG all backed.
Yeah.
ScaryD did a decent amount of a job in terms of delaying some of the backs from LG on the left-hand side, trying to sneak that objective. I don't necessarily mind that play from SpaceStation, considering the Fire Minions haven't made their way downtown to the Titan out of SpaceStation anyway, so they had a small window maybe to get that one.
But the reason they didn't make it downtown is because they had to go push those waves up a little bit. That's, I think, why they couldn't get it just in time. Aquarius, though, going in on Homiefe, who pulls him back in. Mask going up with that through the Cosmos. He's looking to come crashing down. As into the Draconic Corruption goes Jig. Baskin also lurking around the back end as Mask drops down, knocks up 3 members, gets Homiefe, and then comes in JeffHindla, setting up BaRRaCCuDDa.
Knockups on knockups on knockups. BaRRa diving into the fountain. He wants to kill Zapman, but he's going to peel it back now. 3 members surrounding their hunter, making sure that he's going to stay alive. 2 dead on the side of SpaceStation. Now Baskin is going to go into the sky, transforming into a Mask. 3rd Phoenix falling for Luminosity, securing this objective. Even going to knock up ScaryD, and I think that he's going to be in a lot of trouble without his ultimate.
Through the Cosmos, part 2, the long-lost Star Wars film comes in. There we go. Good job from Mask to clean up that kill. 3 members have already fallen. LG look to take game 1 here, Tolly, up against SpaceStation Gaming. This is a huge set between the 2 NA powerhouses, and they came out big.
35 minutes and 57 seconds. This whole first game looked pretty close, even with LG getting a little bit of a lead to start things off. Their first goal period was around that 12-minute mark. Their second one was around the 22 or so, and LG definitely came prepared here. Their late game was just outstanding. Despite Baskin dying a couple of times there throughout that game, it was still very impactful for him to make the impact that he did in the late game. He wasn't afraid to put himself in a position to flank, and that's exactly what he did.
And like you said, Tolly, it was the slow burn this game. Luminosity continually pushed the issue with objectives. Like you said, we kept seeing BaRRaCCuDDa pulling Gold Furies, pulling Portal Demons and Fire Giants, and putting SpaceStation in a position where they had to respond. They had to try and do something, and LG were ready. We saw them stop fighting once, come back to the objective, give up on the objective, go for the fight. The calls were so clean.
And I think what was cleaner was the positioning from LG. They did not get caught out of position inside their own jungle or inside even the jungle from SpaceStation. They were playing around their own wards. They did a good job dancing around it, and SpaceStation was left with nothing to play with. If they wanted to make an aggressive play, it would be almost a dice roll for them.
That's exactly right. A lot of the times, you see some teams go for those 50-50 calls. It feels like LG was not having it this game. If the odds are not in our favor, then we are not going to be the ones that are going for it. But totally, we actually had a couple people that we pay to break down these games, so we don't have to. Let's go ahead and get over to the desk there, Tom, so you can break it down.
Break it down is what we're going to do. Thanks a lot, Mr. Finch. P.S. Welcome to the squad. Tom Banninger joined here by Taco and Alpha Jackal, coach for Team Rival. Fantastic performance from LG. I mean, I think this was just, they said slow burn. I don't know. I saw BaRRaCCuDDa shooting people in the brain.
I think it was only considered a little bit of a slow burn because there was somewhat of a delay to that initial snowball effect that LG had going initially, because when they were committing with that double, I mean, we saw it earlier today already, but the Morrigan double ult on that Ratatoskr, absolutely disgusting to handle.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I were talking about BaRRaCCuDDa during the game. I mentioned Hachiman. I mean, this was interesting because I think BaRRaCCuDDa played well in and of himself, but also the God performed.
Yeah, and we saw the Hachiman versus AMC matchup in our earlier set today, and the Hachiman didn't really have a good time, and AMC was allowed to free farm and get lots of poke and lots of damage. But in this game, I mean, I noticed like 30 minutes in, AMC only had just under 10,000 damage, whilst BaRRaCCuDDa was sitting around 12,000. Meaning that BaRRaCCuDDa wasn't really there to fight or to look to out-trade Zapman. He was there to farm, and that's exactly what he did. Just farm for that late game where Hachiman is considered one of his strongest points. Yeah,
I mean, during the lane, you're just not going to beat an AMC. I don't really care who you are. Maybe a Neath that sits on the tower, but AMC is just going to look to fight you after that, right? You're not going to beat the AMC. So BaRRaCCuDDa, you know, he gets a lot of don't ever call him passive if you want to be on his good side. Put it that way. But intelligently played the lane, kind of playing passive, like I said, but then right there we see the result of the passivity comes out, pure aggression.
Yeah, and I think he did what Zapman was trying to do, but he wasn't quite able to execute, which was rotate to the fights at an impactful time. we saw in that fight, he rotated and got a 4-man ultimate off, and then was able to just clean up house because all the CC, all the ultimates were down. We can see the stats here between the two seasons, and it's just improvement all around.
You know, it's actually interesting, the beauty of it, because the gameplay has improved to the eyesight, but if you look at these stats, they're actually, excuse me, lower than they were last year. But I think that has to do with having a more talented team around him. BaRRaCCuDDa has to, BaRRaCCuDDa doesn't have to be the guy all the time anymore. He frequently is. I mean, he's BaRRaCCuDDa. But last year, Season 3, it was everything on his shoulders or the team didn't win. Now he's got Aquarius in that solo lane. He's got Mask in that jungle. The team as a whole looks better, so his stats take a little bit of a step back, but the player takes a step forward.
I think Alpha Jacko probably called that one best when he said that BaRRa was just able to make those impactful rotations. It was very evident the difference between those two hunters sliding on over to wherever the team fight was taking place. And that's not so much a fault for Zapman as much as it was SpaceStation in general having a really hard time trying to maneuver around that draft from Luminosity. It was just so much chaos because as soon as Mask would come crashing down from that Ratatoskr ultimate, you'd immediately have Baskin following it back up. And most of the time, they'd both double commit to at least one member. It was either Andinster, Zapman, a carry, or at some point just completely disorienting everything that was happening. And for BaRRaCCuDDa, there's no better situation than be able to rotate as a hunter and have nobody looking at you.
Now, we've spoken a lot about, you know, the success of the squad, but this was one of the first times that we get to see Hachiman, right? And he played successfully. Talk to me about the God specifically and its impact. I know BaRRaCCuDDa looked great, but what does the kit of Hachiman bring here?
It's mostly just the team fighting objectives. I think is so highly benefited because of the way that his second ability works. Whenever you drop that Heavenly Banner, then you know that you're going to have a large amount of AoE for increased attack speed to not only you, but your entire team. Hachiman already profits off of increased attack speed just because he is an AA hunter. You want to be landing those in-hands. BaRRaCCuDDa loves landing in-hands in general. And then on top of that, I love the Eagle Eye. His first ability is severely underlooked, I think, by the public perception right now because when you're able to be an ADC player, you have a crit possibility on top of that, and your range is just absolutely insane. There is no way that you're not going to be looking for that at a competitive level for consistent and steady poke out, or even just being able to play it super safe from the back line.
Well, that's Taco, our resident hunter expert, but we've got, you know, also a coach here. Taco sort of gave us the micro perspective of Hachiman. You as a coach, you look at the whole draft and the team as a whole. How does Hachiman sort of change that for the squad?
He has a very good laning phase because that banner, his wave clear ability, it actually starts at his max range as the center of the damage, and then it spreads out just beyond the basic attack range. So he's got good additional poke beyond where you can poke him back, not just with his Eagle Eye, but with his wave clear ability. So it's difficult to get to him without first being at a low health percentage. And he's able to offer that in fights as well, because he's just consistently poking you out from long distance, and you just can't get to him because of it.
So very safe in lane, of course, but when he does...